He used to look at my room every day. Then, at 2 a.m., I heard a knock on the door. What happened right after I opened the door still keeps me awake at night. I live in a small house in a pretty quiet, decent neighborhood. I work from home, so I spend most of my time there. My office is upstairs, in a compact room where I've set up my desk right by a window overlooking the front of the house. I always liked having that window open. It gave me fresh air and a nice view, especially when the weather was good. It was the beginning of fall, so the air was cool and crisp, and I kept the window open nearly all day. Then one ordinary weekday, sometime around noon, I was sitting at my desk, locked into my usual workflow, when something outside caught my eye. A man was standing at the end of my driveway. He wasn't walking by. He wasn't tying his shoe or checking his phone. He was just standing there, completely still, and staring up at the house. I couldn't tell if he could see me through the window, but after a few seconds of watching him, he simply turned and walked away. It was weird, really weird, but I had no idea what to make of it. What was I supposed to do? So, I shook it off and went back to work. I did an occasional check out the window every now and again, but seeing nothing else, I wasn't too worried about it. The following day, I was on the same routine. I got to work and was pretty busy the whole day. I had a lot of video calls with my coworkers. During one of these calls, I spaced out and happened to glance out the window again. That man was there, standing in the same spot at the end of the driveway, and looking up at the house just like he was before. Something about this time was 10 times more creepy and eerie. Why the hell was he back here? I must have stared off at him for a while, because one of my coworkers noticed. I looked worried and asked if everything was okay. I said yeah, and tried to refocus on the meeting. I kept looking back, though. He was standing there for a minute, then I looked back again, and he was gone. The rest of my work day felt to drag on. I couldn't stop thinking about this random guy looking up at my house. It was just so odd. When I got out of work, I went outside and walked around my driveway, looking for any reason for them to be looking up at my house like that. Everything looked normal. However, I did notice that the window of my office was visible and clear from where the man was standing, which means he could likely see me looking at him. I went back inside and made dinner. I had a call with my brother that night, and I mentioned it. He agreed it was odd, but said it was likely nothing. After getting off the phone, I sat down and watched TV, hoping to get my mind off of it. A couple hours passed. It was maybe 9 p.m. I had the show turned down because I was getting tired, but with the low volume, I was able to hear what I thought were footsteps outside my house. I jolted up from the couch and stared at the front door. The footsteps walked up, only stopping for a brief second, then walked away. I hurried over to the door and looked out the peephole. I could only faintly see a figure walking down to the road. Once they were gone, I opened the door. Immediately, I noticed a note taped to the back. It was short. It just said, "Pat, answer the door." I was not only confused, but horrified. How did they know my name? And what was the note even supposed to mean? They didn't even knock or stay long enough for me to have answered the door. Not that I would have, anyway. This was enough for me to call the police. 2 officers came over, and I told them everything. Unfortunately, there wasn't all that much they could do, though. They pretty much wrote it all down and said if something else happens, call them. It really didn't make me feel much better. I stayed up late that night, laying in bed, unable to sleep. I literally just laid there for hours, thinking about this man that was stalking my house and the eerie note he left. Then, at just before 2 a.m., a knock at the front door echoed through the otherwise silent house. My body froze up. The silence of the house was now deafening as I listened in fear. After a few seconds, they knocked again. My heart started beating faster. I got my phone and called 911. They sent officers right away, but the knocks continued the whole time I waited. Eerily, they never got louder or more rushed or aggressive. The knocking didn't change. It was slow, steady, and relentless. Just the same dull thud, repeating again and again, echoing through the empty halls of my home. The 911 operator told me the police were about 2 minutes away. And right after that, the knocks started to slow down. First a 15-second pause, then 30 seconds, then nothing for an entire minute. When the officers finally arrived, there was no one at the door. They were too late. I explained everything again, and this time they seemed to take me a little more seriously. But still, there wasn't much they could do. They promised to have a patrol car circle the area for the next couple of weeks. Those weeks came and went. The man never returned to my door, or at least, not that I know of. It's been months now. Nothing else has happened. But I still can't shake the fear. That note telling me to answer the door, then the knocking at 2 a.m., it haunts me. What did he want? How did he know my name? And the worst part, I don't know if he's truly gone or if he's just waiting. But first, did you know that 98% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed? That means you. And yes, I am speaking specifically to you. Probably aren't. So now would be a great time to leave a like on the video and subscribe. Anyhow, this happened back when I was a freshman in high school. The town I lived in was small, the kind of place that felt stuck in time, old-fashioned compared to how things are now. It was surrounded by dense woods, and most of the homes were spread out, not clustered together like you'd see in a suburb. Our house sat deep in the forest. My parents owned a fair bit of land, and my dad actually built the house with my grandfather years ago. There wasn't a real road leading to it, just a long dirt trail winding through the trees. Because of that, school buses never came close to our place. I had two choices: walk a mile to my friend's house to catch the bus, or just walk the full distance to school. Most days, I just walked the whole way. This morning seemed no different. I was heading down the trail, listening to the peaceful sounds of the forest waking up, when I noticed a car up ahead. It wasn't one I recognized, definitely not my parents or anyone from the area, and it was just sitting there, parked right in the middle of the trail. Thing is, that trail only leads to one place, our house. No one else had any reason to be out there, which made it immediately unsettling. I don't know if I'd ever seen a random car here at all before this. I felt kind of uncomfortable having to pass it. There was a woman inside. She looked 35 or 40, with dark circles under her eyes and shaggy black hair. She glanced at me, but I just looked down. I could feel her eyes on me as I walked past, though. I picked up the pace and got to school. At the dinner table that night, I mentioned it to my parents, asking who it was and why they were there. Both of them looked worried and confused. They told me the woman must have just gotten lost, and I shouldn't worry about it. But I could see the worry in their eyes. They dropped me off at school for the next week, which was odd because they both started work early, like 6 a.m. So they must have called in late for the entire week just to drop me off. Honestly, I thought that it was an overreaction, as I felt I was old enough to handle myself. But I knew my parents were just being safe. On Monday morning of the following week, I packed up my book bag and started walking. During the last week that I'd been dropped off, we never saw the woman or the car, so I really wasn't worried at all anymore. However, this time, when I got to that same spot in the woods, she was there again, sitting in her car, watching me. I had a mini heart attack. This was too much to be a coincidence. Showing up twice on the trail that was basically our driveway, sitting in the same spot, and only showing up when I was walking alone. I made the decision to cut through the woods instead of walking past her again. I took a few steps off the trail, but immediately the woman noticed. She turned her car on and drove up closer to me. I pretended to ignore her, walking faster into the woods. I heard her car door open and her footsteps crunching on the leaves behind me. But then she called out my name, like my full name, in this eerily calm and loving voice. I turned my head and looked at her. She had this dead stare and blank, expressionless face. Her eyes were tired and heavy, and she had this sickly look. I sprinted away, and after losing sight of her, I circled back through the woods to my house, where I called my parents. They called the police and came home right away. What I didn't expect was my parents to know exactly who the woman was. It was my dad's ex-wife from almost 2 decades ago. Apparently, she'd been dealing with mental health issues for quite some time. From what I was told, she would have terrifying episodes, getting fixated on something or someone, and then doing deeply disturbing things. The day I told my parents I'd seen her, they immediately contacted the police. They were sure it had to be her. But the police didn't do much. They just checked in on her and claimed everything seemed fine, that she appeared normal. Still, for that entire week, she had been watching our house. She knew my parents left early for work each morning. She knew I'd be walking to school alone. To this day, my parents never told me what happened to her after that, or what exactly she was trying to do, or why she fixated on me in the first place. I just hope, whatever that was, it never happens again. This happened back in 2019. I was working closing shifts at a grocery store, and at the time, I lived alone in a small 1-bedroom apartment. Like most places, we had our share of regulars, people who came in all the time, often at the exact same hour. One of them was this guy who always showed up right before we closed, a couple times a week. Nobody knew his name, but everyone knew who he was, mainly because we all hated when someone walked in 10 minutes before closing. And since I was usually the only cashier on late shifts, I always ended up dealing with him. He was off, never said much, barely made eye contact, and always looked completely drained, like he hadn't slept in days. That night wasn't any different. He came in just before closing time, grabbed a few items, and headed to the register. I rang him up. He paid. No conversation, just a quiet greeting, and that was it. About 10 minutes later, I finished shutting down the register, did a quick cleanup, clocked out, and left the store around 10:15. But as I walked into the parking lot, I noticed something strange. The guy was still there. He was standing outside his car, just motionless, hands hanging at his sides, staring at the store. Something about it felt really off. I didn't stop. I got in my car and drove straight home. I didn't have work the following day, so I stayed up a bit later than usual. I didn't get into bed until probably 1 a.m. Only moments after getting under the covers, though, a bright light glared into my bedroom through one of the windows. I thought it was a neighbor pulling in, so I didn't really care about it. After a second, the light shut off, which unconsciously confirmed to me that it was just headlights. I fell asleep only a couple minutes later. I woke up in the night to what I thought was my phone ringing. The way I woke up, half asleep, and in the middle of a dream, it was hard to tell what was real and what wasn't. I rubbed my eyes and tapped my phone on the nightstand. It was blank. No messages or phone calls came in. I wasn't sure what to think. I was going to just ignore it and go back to sleep, as I wasn't even fully awake yet to begin with. But the slightest thing caught my eye as I rolled back over. The bedroom door was barely cracked open, not even enough to let any light in or anything. It was just uneven, with the door frame not latched shut. I always closed the door to my room, so seeing it not fully shut immediately woke me up. I got out of bed and walked over, pushing it closed to see if maybe it was stuck for some reason. It smoothly latched into the door frame, just like it always did, so there was no way I'd mistakenly left it open. I felt my body get shaky. My heart was pounding, but even with everything pointing otherwise, I still tried to convince myself that this was somehow nothing. I tried to think of any possible way that this was something to not worry about, but my mind thought back to the light I saw before falling asleep. I walked over to the window and peeked through the blinds. There was a car parked in my driveway. I could only see the back half of it, but I instantly felt a rush of panic. Who was at my house, and was someone inside with me? I hurried over to the door again and flicked on the lights. I stood there by the door, panicking and thinking, realizing I should call 911 just to be safe. I looked at the nightstand that my phone was on, and just before I started to walk over there, I saw an eye looking back at me from a crack in the closet. My body shook, and I let out a gasp, then spun around and sprinted out of my house. By the time I found a neighbor that would answer their door and call the police for me, at least 15 minutes had gone by already. The car in my driveway was still there when officers showed up, but the man was gone. It didn't take long for them to use the car to track him down, though, and I felt nauseous when it turned out to be the man from the grocery store. His reasonings for everything didn't make any sense, but it was clear he'd had his eye on me for a while now, and he was not mentally well. I think the only reason I'd woken up that night was because the man's phone rang while he was hiding, and he silenced it just as I woke up. If not for that, I don't know what would have happened to me, or if I'd even be here right now. I work at a really trashy bowling alley in my small town. It's one of those family-owned type places, real small and not the best. But in our town, it was a regular place a lot of people went to for some reason. I think it was because it was one of the only 24/7 places open for people to hang at. At least, it used to be. This was in December. I had the dreaded 10 to 6 shift. It was almost always dead, and this night, it was even more so. There was a huge snowstorm rolling through our town. From the time I clocked in and took over for the last shift, not a single customer was there. I spent 2 hours cleaning up all the lanes except for one, just in case a group happened to come in later. I checked out the windows. The parking lot was empty, and snow was stacking up. I wasn't sure if someone could even drive through the parking lot with all this snow, unless a plow truck came through. After a bit, I pulled up a chair to the window and sat down, just looking out and resting, as there was nothing else to do. The place didn't have cameras, let alone anyone to watch them, so taking long breaks on slow days, or even sometimes sleeping, was easy to get away with. Another hour or so went by, when, seemingly out of nowhere, there was a loud thud from behind the bowling lanes. I think I was half asleep when it happened, but I jolted up. I got off the chair and walked toward the back room. I really had no clue what that was. Maybe it had something to do with the snowstorm outside. The back room was where all the pins and bowling balls were stored, along with all the machines that run everything. It's basically a long hallway, going the full length of the building. When I opened the door, it was completely dark. I didn't hear or see anything at first, until I looked down. There was water going down the hallway in a very clear footstep pattern. My face went pale. "Hello? Who's in here?" I started walking down, calling out a couple more times before I came across something taped to the wall. It was an envelope. In it were pictures, like Polaroids, of me working alone that night. There were some of me cleaning the lanes and just walking around, and one was disturbingly close to me, as I was sitting by the window. It looked like they must have only been a few feet behind me. I felt like I was going to faint. I bolted back the way I came, straight to the front desk, and immediately dialed 911. I tried to wait inside, but the silence of the building, combined with the uncertainty of what was happening, made my anxiety spiral. I couldn't take it. I ran out to my car and waited there, locking the doors. Despite the weather, the police showed up surprisingly fast, within 2 or 3 minutes. But by then, whoever had been stalking me was already gone. No sign of them anywhere. And of course, the rundown place didn't have a single working security camera, so there was nothing for the police to go on. I still don't know what that person wanted. Whether it was just a twisted prank, or if they had something far worse in mind. Nothing else ever happened after that night. But a couple months later, I quit. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more amazing video. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. All right, that's it for today. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.